Tim Goldstein, autistic adult, and your host for Life in a Neurotypical Universe, where we take a look at life from the perspective of an autistic adult.
Today on Life in the Neurotypical Universe, we have Stacey Ford, and Stacey is from a group called nonPareil. And nonPareil, I did do the research and looked it up on the internet and read it in the about, means no parallel, which or no equal. I think of no parallel because to me it sounds like French, like it would be nonPareil, no parallel. But I guess really it translates to English as no equal, truthfully. And that very much, I think, does sum up autistic adults. There's no equal to another autistic adult. We're all individuals. We're not the same. So, Stacey, nonPareil, I saw on the website, has been involved in the autism at work, essentially, helping autistic adults get the skills they need to get in the workplace since 2010. Okay. The Autism at Work movement, with the big names of SAP and Microsoft and DXC and such, got started in 2015. So what's the deal? All of a sudden, all the corporations think they're supposed to be doing something to hire autistic individuals, and you've been getting them trained and into jobs 5 years before they started. So why aren't we hearing more about things that like nonPareil is doing, which we'll have you explain some more about what you do really do. Why aren't we doing more of that that's getting people into the workplace? Because from what I see on your website, you've placed about 850 people that you've trained and such. And my guess is the website's probably not up to date like mine isn't. And it's probably a higher number than that is. And when we look at a lot of these major Autism at Work companies, you're kicking butt. Let me put it that way. Your numbers would take a whole bunch of them all together of companies that are major world-size organizations. So why is it that we're not paying more attention to what you're doing, which seems to be working phenomenally well at nonPareil, versus the trying to make companies more friendly side of it?
I think you're working on kind of two different perspectives. Thank you for the introduction, by the way, Tim. Appreciate that. It's good to be with you today. I think you're looking kind of from two different angles. You've got an angle of what corporations are doing and companies are doing, and they'll catch up eventually, hopefully, right? But at the same time, I think we're seeing a shift even outside of the workplace, just in our society, of what is understanding, recognizing, accepting what is autism, what is, a whole lot of different pieces to what that means. I think, when the DSM-5 came out and began changing kind of the umbrella of what autism was, that started a little bit of a trajectory. We tell people all the time, just 10, 11 years ago, under the age of 18, 1 in 88 children were diagnosed with autism. Well, now the CDC, of course, they've come back a couple of different times, but roughly 1 in 44. So we've cut that number in half in 10 years. Does that mean there's more people with autism or autistic adults or, out there? Not necessarily. It just means we're getting a diagnosis differently now.
Yeah, I'm with you there completely. And I think my gut reaction to that whole change in numbers is we're still undercounting. And, the reason I say that is I'm older. Got gray hairs on both head and beard and all that stuff.
I'm joining you on that. So
yeah, well, I got you beat, I think, by a few years. And I've been in the tech industry for 25 plus years now. And all around me have been people that have acted in ways that fit with me, but didn't tend to fit into the companies super, super well. Right. And now we're finding out that, I found out, 7 years ago, I'm autistic. I know a lot. I was 54, 53. I don't know. I don't even remember. It was 54 or 53 when I got diagnosed. So yeah, I think there's a lot of, we don't still understand what it is. And even worse to me, the definition we use is one that's based on children's behaviors, not on adults' behaviors.
Agreed, yes.
So yeah, I think this is a lot bigger than just even 1 in 44, even though that's a terrible number to even think about. I think we're going to someday end up at probably double that at least.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's headed that way. I think we're seeing more and more diagnosis, not only in children, obviously the school systems and things are catching up there, but even in adults. What used to be considered, well, at this point, once you reach a certain age, maybe, okay, it's just what it is, right? But now we're seeing a lot more in the healthcare industry say, hey, no, wait a minute, let's identify this. Let's really look at what this is, and then how we move forward with it.
So yeah, I think you're totally right. It used to be, geez, that person's just got a bad attitude,
right?
And now it's, maybe there's more of why they have a bad attitude. And maybe it's that they don't have a bad attitude, but we don't understand their perspective. And their perspective to us looks like it's a bad attitude. But if we understood the perspective, maybe that's not what it really is. And I think that's often been my experience when I've been fired multiple times. And that's usually the problem is their perspective and my perspective. We're at very different odds.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that in the what you say corporate neurotypical world, lying and not telling things is what you're supposed to do, and being brutally honest gets you fired. So that's a very different perspective. The fact that a lot of us autistics, obviously we're all individuals, none of us are identical, but we tend to be very truthful to the point of blunt fault, to the point where people will consider it hurtful. Even
we like to use the word direct, but yes,
I think it goes past direct. To me, blunt is real closer to what it really is, but certainly direct is a little softer way to explain it.
Right.
So yeah, that definitely is. I think one of the challenges is just that whole perspective difference.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we back up? I'm going to roll us back just a little bit and just kind of give us the brief, overview of, so nonPareil, you work with autistic adults. What do you do? You started in 2010. Sure. You've gotten hundreds, and probably it's closer to 1,000 now, I would guess. Autistic individuals into the workplace, and not in folding clothes and those kind of jobs, but in real, in the tech industry, and tell us more. What's the...
Sure. So I'll give you kind of the overview of what we do, and then I'll kind of tell you how we got there.
Perfect.
So in general, we do three things. Ultimately, we build better futures for adults with autism. Well, how do we do that? We do that by giving them a technical skill. We build video games, we build apps, we do things that have a technical element to it to give them some job readiness there. But more importantly is we have an entire curriculum called CORE that works on that work readiness piece. So we're talking about communication, being direct and when not to be direct. We're working on self-advocacy. We're working on how to work in a team, and these different things that you need just as work readiness skills for anybody, regardless of your industry of what you're going into. And then the third thing we do is building a sense of community. Statistically, after high school, a lot of adults on the autism spectrum really don't have a sense of community. They don't have a connection with others. And so whatever their affinity is, maybe that's to a particular a group that's music, or a particular video game, or an affinity for whatever that is, we put them together to just socialize and connect and have a great time and just enjoy life together. So those three things kind of working in tandem is what we do to bring hope and build better futures.
I want to say something about the community part, being an autistic individual.
Sure.
And this is really, kind of speaking to the parents that have autistic children. Mm-hmm. Because one thing that I hear frequently from parents that have autistic children is, my child doesn't have friends, or only has one friend.
Right.
And they're feeling that they're missing out on life. And what I found personally, and it's really what you just said, is friendship for a lot of us autistic individuals is based on a shared interest.
That's right.
It's not I went to school with you, so I'm going to be your friend for the entire life just because we happen to go to the same school and we beat our chests over the same mascot for the sports team. It's because we both like this one sport, or we both like gaming, or we both like painting, or singing, or whatever the thing is. So I think that's something that just you just kind of like mentioned it along the way, but I think it's something to highlight for people that aren't familiar working with autistic individuals, and especially those parents. Friendships in autism tend to be totally built around a shared interest. And when that shared interest changes, I like to say we come to a fork in the road and we just go to each other. Cool, you're closer to your destination, I'm closer to mine. I'll catch you later sometime.
That's right. No love lost.
And if you meet up 5 years later, you pick up exactly where you were. There's none of this, oh, I won't see you for the rest of my lifetime. It's cool. I got a new interest. I got new friends.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. And I'm speaking too as a parent. I have a son who's 12 on the spectrum, and I noticed the same behavior patterns there too. I mean, he's whatever he's into he's got his friend because they're playing Roblox together. Yep. And they may be sitting right beside each other, but they're playing this game together, and that's their affinity, that's their connection, with each other. And we see that. We've got a group that just here a couple of days ago, they get together and have a jam session. You've got a guitar player and somebody brings their bongo drum in, and so that's their affinity is music. We've got a lot of very talented artists, and so they will connect over certain types of art and how to do that. Some, again, a lot of video gamers around. So our Smash Brothers Club is, just huge, and you hear laughter and just connectivity amongst playing Smash Bros. So it really just finding where their niche is, and that varies depending on, we call our students crew, but depending on who our crew are at that time. Because what that affinity is today may not be what it is in 2 years or a year or, the next term even. So we adapt that accordingly.
Right. Yeah. That technology and all those things changes, and what's cool and fun to play with changes along with that. So yeah, obviously interests are going to change. I also like something that you just said and kind of highlighted a little bit. A lot of the interests are not technology. Not that there's not a lot of interest in technology. I'm a total tech out geek, but I also have interests that are not, technology ones. Sure. I have a 3D printer and a CO2 laser and lathe and the milling machine and all that stuff sitting here at home. I mean, I'm a total geek.
We'll send you some of our assets so you can print those out and use them. So anyway.
But you mentioned that there's interest in art and music, and there's, particularly in the corporate autism at work world, there's been all this emphasis of, autistic individuals are just like great at QA and computer programming. And then we don't mention that, there's autistic individuals that are executives. Elon Musk, so he lost $44 billion or whatever, but he's still the second richest guy in the world. I mean, he seems to be doing okay for an autistic dude. And he's obviously not writing code by himself.
Right.
So I think that's something, again, it's just important to highlight that while technical skills are certainly, there are plenty of people that are autistic that have great technical skills, not all autistics are technically oriented people.
Correct. And we see, and that's really kind of, as we started as a company, as a nonprofit, working with adults with autism, we started building video games. We thought, hey, this is the direction. Our two founders, they were in the tech space and thought this is something we could do, but quickly realized we need a lot more than just giving them the technical skills to build video games. We've got to give them the leadership skills and those work readiness skills. And, you and I have talked previously even about, interviewing and some of those different things that we can help move to that next level, give them some understanding and some skills to be able to be successful, whatever that success looks like for them.
I so much agree on the work readiness piece. And I have to say that not being diagnosed till I was 54, Obviously, I've had a career. I've been married 37 years. I've got a 35-year-old daughter. I've been working.
Sure.
And so most of the time I didn't know I was autistic, and I did get fired lots of times, enough to decide to write a book about interviewing because I had to get really good at that. And I had to learn those the hard way. And it wasn't really till I was diagnosed and started understanding and diving into, became my special interest suddenly. Oh gosh, I'm autistic. What's that mean? Everything else, clear it off the table and that's it. Everything's autism. My wife would say, just like, I'm sick of hearing about autism. Shut up. But what dawned on me is, what I had heard my entire life was, why can't you be like everybody else? Why can't you do things like everybody else? And I think any autistic individual, if they've heard that once, they've heard it a million times. And if they're autistic, they've heard it a million times.
Yes.
And it dawned on me that the problem was the way I perceive the world is not the way that everybody else does.
Exactly.
And because of that, and there is no book of this is the way you're supposed to do it.
Right.
I came to the conclusion, now a lot of people can just kind of figure out the way they're supposed to do it. And neurotypicals. Right. A lot of other neurodistinct individuals that are not autistic tend to have less social problems, even though they do have other challenges.
Right.
So what it really dawned on me was what I was missing, because I didn't have that innate ability to just figure it out like neurotypicals tend to, I needed a map. And I didn't have a map. So in other words, I didn't have something I could reference to say, okay, how can I interpret this? And there's the old saying about a map is not the city. So in other words, I don't need every detail of every step along the way, but I need something that can give me some guidance. And so I kind of chewed on that for about a year, trying to figure, okay, I need a map. Okay, and now I recognize where my problem has been. I haven't known the appropriate way to handle the situation, what seemed appropriate to me, which usually was being directly blunt. Did not necessarily work well in the world, even though to me, if you messed up on something, you go up over to somebody and you say, you messed up on it. Let's get it fixed. What's the problem? And it didn't go over real well when I had employees, had my own company. That was, my wife spent more time patching relationships than.
Yes.
But it finally dawned on me that is one of the big problems, is we don't have a map as autistics that we can reference to say, oh, I get how I should think of it. So I came up, at least for myself, and it'll be interesting to hear how this matches with your job readiness type preparation. I came up with the idea that think of it as just a small, intimate group. And when you have a small, intimate group, this tends to have a fairly kind of rigid structure. There's the dominant person that kind of everybody looks at as being the leader, whether it's formal or not. There's people kind of in the middle, and there's people kind of at the periphery. And now we've reduced it to something simple. We're not trying to deal with a complex thing, and we're in the heat of emotions that we're not processing anyways. And what I started noticing was there's some really simple rules of how that group would interact with itself. And this is assuming they're not an autistic group, because if you put a group of autistics together, we all do perfectly fine being blunt with each other.
Correct.
But it dawned on me that the worst thing you could do ever to anybody in that type of group is shame them in front of the group.
Right.
And as a autistic individual, if you've messed up on some code, I'm just going to go over there and say, hey, this code here, like, it's junk, man. Fix the crap. Sure.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have the skills, I'm not, going to be a jerk about it. But if you don't know better, it's like, hey, let me help you understand how to fix it. But if you really do know better, I'm just going to call it out. Well, that obviously breaks that model of never shame somebody in front of the group.
Right.
And then the second rule that goes to that is always consider rule number one.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you teach the skills? For me, that was the trick, was coming up with this very simplified model. And in the simplified model, you can usually figure out in about any situation why it would go wrong or what would be the best way to keep it from going wrong.
Right. Well, and I think it's ongoing. There are a lot of different trainers and people that talk about just neurodistinct and what that looks like. Using the example of the elevator, when most people, you get on an elevator and you're going to stand there, somebody else gets on, well, you kind of move to one side and the other person, on one side. And if 3 people are on, they kind of spread out, and 4 people, and continue to do that. Well, if you're in an elevator by yourself and somebody on the spectrum comes and joins you in the elevator, very often they may come and stand right next to you. Plenty of space in the elevator, but it's just that it's of no consequence, no reason why you wouldn't just stand next to there. It's that social norm. Well, where do you learn that? You can't really identify, going back to your childhood, where you learn those kinds of things. It just happens, right? Well, individuals on the spectrum are always writing that playbook. They're always writing that, particularly children, as you're growing up and learning, okay, this is something I'm going to have to be conscious on the front part of my mind, not just something on the back. And so they're constantly writing in this playbook about what is acceptable socially, what is acceptable professionally, what is acceptable relationally. And so we're trying to, first, we've got to gauge a little bit of where each individual is at coming in, what's already in their playbook. And then how do we kind of reinforce, that playbook? So we do that on both an individual and more corporate, classroom kind of settings. So we model a lot of that. Our core classrooms are set up much like a conference room at any corporation. And the dialogue and the teaching about advancement, about leadership, about communication is a really big one. What do you do when somebody uses sarcasm and you don't know what to do with that? Just things that may come as a norm for many. Again, writing that playbook. And so what can we do to add? So shame is one of those things too, but when you begin looking at shame, Tim, it's different. People identify shame even differently than each other. So how are you doing this in a context that is broad enough that they have this understanding and this skill in their toolbox to do this consistently? So you're right on target with that.
So it sounds like, yeah, we're talking about it 2 different ways, but we're really talking the same thing. You can't build a step by step of, when A happens, do B, when B happens, do C, because the world is too complex. So you have to build more of the map style thing where there's a conceptual, okay, this is what it's laid out. Now, when I'm in the city, I'm going to deal with the little things I come to, but I have that overall view of this is where I need to be.
Correct. Yeah, and even every neighborhood on the map looks a little different. But how do you navigate that with some norms? Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we definitely agree on that. And I definitely say that it changed my relationships with people in the world. And since learning that one, I haven't gotten fired. Gotten close, but managed to not get fired since I've come up with that model, because I now have some way to navigate this field that I just I didn't understand. I mean, I am very poor, like a lot of autistic individuals, at recognizing emotion in other people.
But Tim, let me ask you, did the light bulb kind of come on for you when you had that realization of, oh, okay, this is really, now I have kind of this stamp, this flag to point and say, okay, now I've got this in place. Because we see that all the time, particularly coming right out of high school. They've had the norm of what, the special ed department or wherever they've been walking through high school. And then they get out of that context. And we see these light bulb moments almost daily of, oh, okay, so I can do this way. or this is a way in which I can do this? Did you kind of have that light bulb moment, even as an adult?
I don't know if I would say it was a light bulb moment, but it certainly was a clearing of the haze.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know if it was so much a bam at one, the lightning bolt hit me and suddenly
sure.
I was holding the tablets with the answer to the world. But my wife has always told me, and as I said, I've been married now for 37 years, and she's always told me, Tim, everybody isn't like you. And it never made any sense to me. What do you mean everybody's not like me? Well, everybody's like
I do.
Everybody's like me. We're all the same. What do you mean? And when I say it was like clearing the haze, finally what she had been saying for all those years made sense in recognizing that as an autistic individual, my perspective of the world, what happens, what the interactions are, is a completely different. I don't know if you're a physics fan. There's the concept of a multiverse where there's multiple universes, but they all become one world, the one world theory of universes. Mm-hmm. Well, I think whether that's true or not in the real physics world, who knows? But I think that's a good explanation. Us autistics live in one universe where the norms, the rules, how we interact work one way. And that's why you can put a bunch of us in a room together and we get along just fine.
Right.
But then we have to interact with this other portion of the multiverse, another shard of the universe. And it has a different set of norms and rules. And unfortunately, their side is the one that has the jobs and things like that. But the reality is now we put these two on top of each other. Well, our norms didn't change, but we're both living in this shared world, but that other world has the power, we'll say, just because they're writing the rules.
Right.
And that became clear to me that I was really essentially, I live in a different world than most non-autistic individuals do. Because I can't think of it as being the same world, because the way I perceive it, the way I process it, the way I think about it does not match. It cannot be the same world.
Right.
So, yeah, it was more of a clearing of a haze of seeing that, oh, now I see what the difference is. I see what she's been saying all along. And we didn't know anybody else that was autistic. So that's, now we know lots of them. And as my wife has learned more about autism, she can think back about individuals that were upper managers she had or bosses or such that she did not get along well with. They were challenging. Sure. And now she can identify it. They were autistic as heck. And she worked in telecom. There were a lot of engineers and such. So,
yeah. That's funny. We hear that all the time too. You look back and go, oh, okay, yes, that makes a lot more sense now. So yeah,
definitely there was that clearing. For me, it was more of a clearing of the haze and seeing more of the landscape than. But yeah, there definitely was that recognition that we're living in worlds that have different patterns. Correct. And the way I like to think about it and explain it now would be if we decided we wanted to go someplace that had fine food and great art, which is a cool place to do, right? Fine food and great art go together wonderfully. We'd probably either go to Italy or France. There's other countries we'd go, but those would certainly be two that, come to mind pretty quickly.
Right.
Well, we recognize that Italians and French have different ways. First off, they use a different language from us and obviously from each other. So that's one thing that's obviously a big difference. But there's also different norms. There's different ways of interacting. And when I suddenly saw that pattern and recognized that being autistic was like being a foreigner in a different country, that's when I suddenly gained the ability to navigate it. And that was my map. My map was, I get it now. I'm a foreigner. This is the land. This is the way it works.
Sure. Yeah. An approach of expectations and all those things. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell me more. This is good stuff. I know you also have 4 locations.
We do. We've started here in the Dallas area. We're in Plano, and kind of the mothership of what we're what we're doing. But we've expanded. We have locations in Austin and Houston and Orlando, and of course through this lovely pandemic, we were able to go online, and so we actually are available anywhere in the country through our online program to do the same curriculum, same training online if anybody's not near one of our locations. So any
autistic adult anywhere in the country would be able to access your programs through the online side if, I don't know.
Yes.
Well, what's the process? Say, I got my kid coming out of college, and kiddo has phenomenal grades in doing stuff, but is definitely incapable of getting a job.
Sure. And we have those that come to us from different angles, some right out of high school and realize, okay, I tried college, it didn't work. Maybe I need another direction. Some that come to us with master's degrees, but saying, hey, I'm just not ready for the workplace yet. So just kind of depending on where they're at. Obviously, go to our website and there's a form there you can fill out online. And if you're local and looking at one of our local campuses, can come take a tour. We invite anybody to come take a tour, whether you're just know somebody on the spectrum or want to know more. That invite is always there. Happy to give a tour, but just explore that, and then we can dialogue with you and just kind of say, okay, what are your needs? All the time we tell people, the spectrum is vast, it's big, and so we work with most of those individuals kind of right in that middle section, not extreme on one end or the other, but to make sure you have the capacity to do the beginning stages of the tech things and can communicate in somewhat effective way to do that. So a little bit of an assessment there to make sure it's a fit. And then we jump in and see. So the very first term, you take what's called Intro to Tech. And it's kind of a buffet of everything that we offer because, we do a little bit of environmental art, we do 2D design, 3D design, scripting, completely different than the art side. So really kind of take a buffet, and then you kind of determine your track, which track's going to work best for you. And we have some that finish a track and say, hey, I want to do another track too. And they do multiple tracks during their time here. So we really do customize as best as we can for each individual because everybody is different, and everybody has a different set of needs. So,
it's fascinating because we usually hear about technology training. So everybody recognizes the technology, whether it's Microsoft, the technology, or AWS, or Google's, or Oracle, or whatever.
Right.
But you also mentioned 2D and 3D design. So I'm kind of guessing that starts getting into, and I'm guessing you may correct me if I'm wrong, but that starts getting into CAD and things like that, which is obviously it's a technology, but most people don't think of it as technology. It just doesn't come to their mind that doing 2D and 3D design work is technology. And right. I had a small manufacturing company for 10 years and got pretty good at the 3D design. And to me, it was as much fun and as challenging as the 25 years I've spent in the traditional tech world.
Yes, exactly.
Database is my specialty, is data and analytics. To me, there's no difference between the two other than the tool that you're using, but the approach, the concepts, the way you've got to think about it is the same. So I like hearing that you have a much wider view than simply, let's just train them in traditional tech of networking, infrastructure development, database.
Right.
But there's also those other technology areas.
Sure. And most that come really fall a lot of come and say, hey, I have no idea. Let me take intro to tech and let me determine and learn. We have some that are very, very lean to the art side of things, and that's the direction they want to go. And we have some, nope, I really want to be in this more analytical stage and do scripting. So it really just kind of depends, like I said, on where they're at. And then moving, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? Are you mastering this level? Okay, let's move to the next level. And so it really just depends on each individual.
So on the art side, obviously, and if we're doing 2 and 3D design, there's the technical side of 2 and 3D design. You're designing objects, products,
Sure.
and such. But there's also the, I guess we'll say, more artistic version of 2 and 3D design, which would be the games.
Mm-hmm.
It could be you get into any kind of design. It could be designing cars. It could be designing whatever, but not the technical part of it, but the look, the feel, the
be as simple as a restaurant menu. I mean, really.
Yeah, right. I mean, it'd be a graphic
mm-hmm.
designer.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's stuff that you also teach and train.
Just yesterday, I was giving someone a tour, and we stepped into a class. They were working on Photoshop. Okay, learning and teaching the details, the nuances, and how to work in detail with Photoshop. You think that sounds pretty simple because a lot of us do that, but we don't do it to the extent of what our crew. I don't have the capacity to do what most of them can do. So yeah, it really just depends. It's a wide range. In addition to that, we have a new IT support track where if somebody says, "Hey, I really want to get my certification and to be, both Dell and Google, to be able to certify with them and do IT support through those channels as well." So again, several options, but all along the way, they're learning these work readiness skills regardless of what tech track they're taking.
Phenomenal. And I think that's certainly one of the big challenges to overcome is that work readiness. You call it work readiness. I call it understanding we live in a different universe.
Right.
But that it's actually woven in as an integral part of what you do. It's not, let's just go teach you a bunch of tech and then put some support around you of somebody you can call when you're ready to rip somebody's head off.
Well, and the tech industry it's aggressive and it can be difficult. We realize we're not going to funnel every single one of our crew members into build the next, work with whatever gaming company to build the next Candy Crush or Angry Birds. That's just probably not realistic, but a lot of them they may go that direction. But we've got to give them more than just those technical skills. We've got to get them ready to just do life and interact and be the best employee that they can be, regardless of where that is.
I want to talk about that a little bit more. And you, as,
Sure.
as being a parent with an autistic child, is the perfect person to have the conversation with. Me being an autistic adult who grew up, I graduated high school in 1977. So I was in elementary school in the 1960s. And my mother did have the school psychologist evaluate me because I was a problem child. And the school
That's all air quotes there in your mind. It's all good.
No, I truly was a problem child. There was no doubt about it. I lived in the principal's office. He and I got along real well. It's actually, this is so funny as heck, kind of sidebar, but ends up the principal of the elementary school, who I used to spend so much time in his office because it was the detention over lunchtime, and I'd be reading his World War II books and running the mimeograph machine. Remember the smell of the mimeograph machines?
Yes, I understand.
And ended up being the something like the uncle of my brother-in-law's ex-wife.
Interesting.
It's one of those crazy kind of, the world's a small world. But what the psychologist's conclusion was that the problem was that my mother and I were too similar to each other, and that's what caused the friction. Because they didn't know Asperger's wasn't known in the U.S. And
Sure.
While DSM calls it all ASD, I definitely have more what you would say the Asperger profile.
Sure, of course.
Of it. I can communicate quite well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm oblivious to other people's emotional challenges for the most part. But also kind of funny, my mother, 4 days before she passed away, we were sitting chatting, and I had told her when she died 2 years ago. So I had known that I was autistic for a number of years before, and I told her all the way along that I think you're autistic, Mom. And about 4 days before she passed away, I was sitting there with her, and she says, "You're right. I thought it came from your dad, but I'm the autistic one." So the psychologist was really right in the long run.
Yes.
And thank goodness they didn't diagnose me, because back then autistic kids got put into psychiatric wards.
Right. Yes, that's exactly
They
right.
were institutionalized. So long way to get to the point, other than kind of some color there. But what I see amongst the adult population, and I say the divide is about 35 right now, and it keeps moving, because 35 that would put you at getting out of school right at the beginning of the 90s or just before the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Before the 90s, schools were not very well equipped and they didn't know what autism was. They didn't recognize it. It would only be the most extreme cases, what we call now level 3 autism, that they would be able to know. So we got
that manifested itself a lot more clear in some of those ways. They could see that much easier. Yes.
Yeah, it was so obvious. That's the kind of people who are doing self-harm and banging their heads against walls, and it's so obvious that they would recognize that, but they didn't recognize the Asperger style, or even like a mid-level person who had problem with the social interactions. We didn't know what that was. That was just, I don't know. They just don't get it. That's their problem.
Right.
So I say, if you're over 35, you probably got through school before you ever could have been diagnosed in school, unless you were level 3, unless you were really, severely impacted by autism. And what I see lots of us are in careers. Right. We have jobs. We went and found jobs. We just went out, we did it, we failed, we got a new job, we failed again, we got a new job.
Figured it out. Mm-hmm.
We figured it out. And my mama and my daddy didn't go out and find me any jobs, ever.
Right.
They didn't go and lead with the school or the manager or whoever that I needed something special. I just had to go figure out how to be in the workforce. And it might be tough love, but kind of worked out okay. I work for one of the biggest tech companies in the world nowadays, and there's people that would love to work there. Well, it took me 40 years to get there, so don't quit, but don't expect it to be your first job either.
Right.
But what I'm seeing now a huge amount, and I end up doing occasionally, I'll do some counseling and help with younger kids or their parents or whatever. I'm seeing that a lot of the kids now, when they get out of, and let's say they're going through the college track, and it could be just as true as they get out of the high school level. I like to say I'm a 1-year community college dropout. And I think the only thing lower than that is being a 1-year junior college dropout. So you really can't get much lower than 1-year community college dropout. But let's just stick with the college track, because at that point they got out, they've got a degree, they've got good grades. Oftentimes they're extremely good grades.
Right.
But they can't find a job. They can't get a job. They're incapable. They don't even know what to do about a job. Why? What's the change that took people who were of the same intellectual capabilities with essentially the same qualifications? And before we figured it out that they were different, and we just treated them as being the problem children that misbehaved and spoke badly to the teacher and all the crazy things we did.
Right.
What do you think? What's your thoughts on why is there that fork in the road of suddenly now there's a huge group that used to be able to get a job by themselves that is no longer capable of getting employment?
Well, that's a really loaded question.
Well, that's why I'm asking it.
Well, I mean, you could go down the rabbit hole about our education system, about, colleges and universities and what they're preparing people for. You could go down that rabbit hole about, a self-entitlement, in our society. I mean, there are a whole lot of elements there. I think part of it, and this is what I'm hearing from individuals that have been a part, have come through our program. And again, maybe they've come in with a degree, but just said, I'm struggling on the job side. Or, hey, I had 9 interviews in this past month, and I can't seem to get any of these, but I'm very qualified for this. So some of it may be as simple, as, okay, you can't even get them to the table, to get started in that position because you're doing a group interview with 15 people in a room, and most of them maybe are not on the spectrum. And so interviewing, looks different, maybe. That could be one reason. Another reason, what I'm hearing just other people talk and what they've shared with me, I think some of it is, and I have a little bit of a background in psychology, so I think some of it may just even be our motivators internally, our motivators externally. There could be several different reasons. I don't know that there's just one answer or solution to that. I think there's a whole lot of different factors that play into that.
But I definitely agree. There's not one answer, but would you say that you have seen that there is this difference of people who didn't know they were autistic as they matured and became adults being, I don't know, we'll say more able to move themselves ahead than the people who have come through the school systems where they know that they were autistic and they were handled as autistic children?
I would agree with that. I mean, I think back, the statistics right now is almost 90%. Again, whoever does the statistics, right? The statistic people, almost 90% say that adults on the autism spectrum are either unemployed or underemployed. And so I think even a lot of those now may have jobs, but they're not the fulfilling careers that they long for or desire for or even have the skill set for. So was that the case 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Maybe. We don't have the statistics necessarily to align to know one way or the other if that was the case. But I do agree with you. I do agree that we're seeing it maybe in a little different context today than we did few decades ago.
Yeah, I take exception with that 80 or 90 or whatever number.
That's why I said the people who do the statistics.
Right. And the reason I say I take exception with that is I work with so many autistic adults that were diagnosed as adults or didn't even know that they're autistic, but I'm obviously not a clinician. I'm not qualified to give a medical diagnosis, but when you look at it from more of a social model, which is really how we're starting to look at it much more as a own culture. Autism is a culture, essentially.
Right.
Well, we can recognize people from our own culture. If they hang with us, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, probably a duck.
Right.
There is a huge amount of people who are employed that are adults that are autistic, either knowingly or highly, highly probably, but they're not counted. Nobody stands up. Nobody says, "Hey, I'm here." I know at the tech company that I work for, I know there's hundreds of autistics there, and officially we don't exist.
You're right.
But there's hundreds of us there, and some of them are younger, but a lot of them are older. So that's why I say I disagree with the statistics, because the problem is what group are they counting when you can't even get them identified because most companies are afraid to ask.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think too, support has a lot to do with that. Again, when you and I were growing up, I mean, I can't speak for you, but what I did things outside. We played games. We played with sticks as a kid. Now you're in front of a screen. And
I
you're
grew up on
playing
a
video
farm,
game,
so so
you do it.
I was, outside.
Well, I grew up rurally too. So, but I'm just saying the support system. So we see so many parents. I mean, just yesterday, I had a conversation with a parent. Their son had been out of high school for 2 years. He had tried working at a local grocery store. It just had run into so many troubles. That didn't last very long. And he has sat in his room for 2 years and played video games. And that's been his existence. And mom is saying there's got to be more to this. He didn't have the support. He didn't have a direction. He didn't even know where to turn. Okay, how can I get help? How can I find a place? So I think that support has a lot to do with it too. And I don't know, I'm just asking the question. This may not be the case, but do we have less supportive systems in place now versus 30 years ago? I mean, I don't know.
This is what I think it is. And again, it's very complex. There's a million different answers.
Of course
but I think if just trying to reduce it to a nugget of what is it summed up as, I think it really, you can sum it up as saying kids today, particularly if they're autistic, so there's IEPs and all that stuff guiding them through, are not taught to fail forward. They're not taught. They're not taught how to fail.
Sure.
Matter of fact, everything is done so that they never fail. And I don't know about you, but I know for myself, some of my best learnings has come from some of my biggest failures.
Absolutely.
And my this is kind of a funny little thing. My wife, and again, I was a maker. I call it a geek before because you were a geek before they even came up with the term maker. But I ended up with a manufacturing company, so obviously I was a maker. Ended up with all the big machines and stuff. But I would show my wife different things that I had made, whether it was my current hobby or whatever it was. And she always assumed that I was able to do these things perfectly the first time. The reason was I never showed her the 12 failures ahead of that one.
Right.
That got me to, now I understand. I got to change this here. Now you build another version. And now I got to redesign over here. Right. And I don't think we're teaching kids that success, what would I say? The milestones to success is the failure sitting on the side of the road that got you there.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's really, I think, where the crux of the problem is. Now we can get into why aren't we teaching them how to fail? Well, that gets into is it the school system? Is it the parents? Is it the who knows? I don't know why, but is it just society as a whole? Failing on a video game is not the same thing as failing doing the things you and I did as kids, especially being ruralies, where, hey, it was pretty wide open what you get away with and what you could do.
Exactly. We've got the scars physically to prove it too, right?
You got it. Building hay forts to cutting trees down and building bridges over the creek and
yes,
on and on and on. Doing things that today would be probably illegal and get you arrested, but
likely, yes.
But I think that's a big challenge. Once again, in life in a neurotypical universe, we had more to talk about. There were more details I wanted to know, and we hadn't had a chance to cover them. So we just kept on recording and we kept on talking. And to make the episodes a reasonable length, I'm splitting this into 2 episodes. So this will be the end of episode 1. If you want the contact information to reach nonPareil or Stacey, just look down in the show notes and I'll have it down there. If you go and listen to episode 2, which will be coming out a few weeks later, you'll also have him telling you what that contact information is. And again, it will be in the show notes. Hope you enjoyed this one and join us for the next episode. We hope that you've enjoyed another episode of Life in a Neurotypical Universe. Please, if you enjoyed this, share it with your friends. Go take their phone and subscribe them. It will help us all out. If you want to know more about neurodiversity or have any questions for me, you can reach me at my website, timgoldstein.com.
where I'll be more than glad to help you as best I can to navigate through the neurotypical universe.